Hi everyone, welcome to Toxiscandia, stories of a toxicologist living in Scandinavia. My name is Sveta and today we are going to talk about toxins, and I will give you 5 reasons why I am not super worried about toxins that are apparently everywhere. I can imagine that you hear that a lot in mass media, that there is a harmful substance in food, there are harmful substances in water, in the air that we breathe, and how come that we are still alive, and how come that scientists and everyone who's dealing with that are not in total panic. And I am going to share with you my own reasons as a professional in this field, and I hope this will help you to calm yourself and to be more realistic about toxins around us. If you are interested in this topic, please continue watching this video. This video is going to be quite optimistic. I will tell you why not to panic, but this does not mean that there are no problems in our world. Of course, there are a lot of toxins that we are dealing with. There are also some forever chemicals that are in our environment forever, basically. It's very hard to get rid of them. So that is why professional toxicologist is required nowadays, and that is why people are working with this kind of things. But I'm going to talk about more like our everyday life. People, normal people, laymen, people that do not work with that professionally. And there is, of course, a lot of fear regarding toxins among people that are maybe not very familiar with these topics. That is why it can even come to panic, and some people get really worried and really concerned about this kind of stuff. And there is some background to it, of course. As I said, there are a lot of problems that we're dealing with. However, there are some things also on the optimistic side to consider when you are thinking about toxins everywhere and all the harm that they can do to us. Why this is a sensitive topic for many people? Of course, because toxins are directly related to our health, so they can impact our health negatively. We can get sick. Some of us can die even, so it is a serious stuff. But another reason for these concerns is non-transparency of the information. Science and real life are very isolated from each other, I would say, because science has become so complicated, and normal people are not aware of what's happening there very often. That is why we cannot say that information is really very transparent, and it is often being abused in mass media because they are trying to cause very strong emotions when we are reading the article in the newspaper or somewhere on the internet. Of course, we are noticing those pieces that have very, very loud titles, that some toxic substance is going to kill us, something like that. And the whole picture that they draw is very dramatic, which is in reality usually not true. And let's start with the reasons why I personally, as a toxicologist, am not that worried about us as a human race. First of all, compensatory mechanisms of our bodies. What does it mean? This applies to all living organisms, not only humans, but humans included. And this are the mechanisms that are naturally in us as a result of evolution, that are used by our organisms, our bodies, to compensate the effects of harmful chemicals that come from outside. Our bodies, our metabolic systems are so complex that not even biochemists, I think, have the whole picture. Let alone laymen or normal people that are not familiar with that. However, we are still alive after all these thousands, millions of years of evolution, and this means that our bodies are quite good at that. We have organs like kidneys, like liver, the main detoxifying organ, other systems of our body that are created for dealing with toxins, and our body is really good with that. It is very well tuned, and all the detox diets that are being advertised in mass media, they are usually nothing compared to what our body can do. These diets usually don't work at all, or even if they work a little bit, if there is some effect, it's very minimal compared to what our body normally do on everyday basis. Of course, you can say that in the last 100 years of very active technological development in our world, all the industrialization and stuff, that we are exposed to much more toxins than before. This is of course true. We produce many toxins accidentally or on purpose, but on the other hand, we also have much more information, much more knowledge now. We can use our compensatory mechanisms, modulate them, modify them, use them for our advantage. So this is actually a two-way process, and we are getting better and better at that. And you can see that people are living longer nowadays. This means that it actually works. There are compensatory mechanisms not only naturally in our bodies, but also developed in our societies by science, by knowledge that we have. So this is not something to really worry about. And there is actually no need to have a special diet, to eat only clean, good foods. It is enough actually to eat different foods, to have very much variety in your everyday food consumption, and then it will be enough actually for you to get the most of the nutrients, to get help that you can receive from food that you are eating. So you don't actually have to do much. This is the job of our bodies, also our healthcare that is improving from day to day. So this is a complex system, of course. On one hand, we are producing more bad stuff, but on the other hand, we are also getting better and better in dealing with the consequences. So this is something that calms me, and I hope this will calm you too. Number two is the dose response curves. This is something that toxicologists work a lot with. Here, what you need to know, that all the risks that we are dealing with when we talk about toxins consist of two parts. This is always initial hazard of the substance, so intrinsic properties of the substance, why it is hazardous, and exposure, how we are exposed to this substance. If there is a hazard but no exposure, there is no risk, and vice versa. And doses are very important in toxicology. This is like a central aspect, I would say, and these compensatory mechanisms that we talked about before, they are helping us to deal with small doses, even that sometimes we don't get any effects whatsoever before we reach a high enough dose. This means that with small doses of toxins, our body is often capable to metabolize them completely and excrete them completely, so we don't get any harmful effects. And when we are looking at the dose response curve, where on one scale there is a dose, a growing dose, on other scale it's a response that we get from our bodies, it's often so-called S or sigmoid shaped curve. That means that first it goes very low, it doesn't raise at all in the terms of response, and only when it reaches certain dose it will go up, meaning that there is some response from our body, negative response if we talk about toxins. So this first part, before the curve goes up, means that this is the dose that our body can handle. So there is no response, no negative effect, and we are safe till we reach this dose. There are, of course, daily doses for all the substances. They are calculated, they are quite well known. So if we see that the exposure is too much, that people are exposed to much higher doses than they are supposed to, this is something that has to be corrected, and different authorities, scientists, industries themselves, they are very motivated to do that, not to cause illness, not to be responsible for that in the end. So this is something that helps in work of toxicologists and in work of everybody who are dealing with chemicals. There are of course some exceptions where this curve is not sigmoid shaped when it goes up directly, so there is no safe zone, but usually this principle works for most of the substances, and we are quite safe there in the small dose zone. Every time you hear about harmful, dangerous, toxic substance, you should wonder about the dose. What is the dose? Is it this very small one, or is it enough to cause us harm? This is something that is very central in this topic, and this is something that also has to be considered. Number 3, species that were tested. This applies to this news that we see that some substance is killing people, and then you should wonder what kind of studies has been performed there, because it is not legal to test chemical substances on people, and the only thing that we have is epidemiological studies that are just observing effects of substances on people during a long time. There is usually no intervention, so it's quite hard to distinguish between different factors. So human studies are not readily available to us, unfortunately. So that is why this loud titles of the articles, they are usually talking about animal studies or even in vitro studies with cells, where mechanisms are very different from what happens in a human body. So you should always wonder, what is this study based on? Was it in vivo study on animals? Was it in vitro study, or was it actually something that has been seen in humans? Because these are very different things. Of course, for very new substances where we don't have epidemiological data, we have to rely on animal studies, and there some extrapolations are made. And although humans and animals are very different, we still can use that results. But it would not mean directly if rats or mice died of some toxin that a human will die too, because the studies that use animals, they usually deal with very high doses. They use high doses on purpose to see a harmful effect, like the worst case scenario. But in reality, people are usually not exposed to that high dose, so it will not be extrapolated directly. And we already know that dose is really important in toxicology, and in this case as well. There is also route of exposure that can be different. For example, if humans are usually exposed by inhalation, in animals it can be done by injecting the substance or ingesting the substance. So it is very different ways how substance reacts with our body. So this is something that always has to be questioned as well. Is it the same route of exposure, or is it different? For example, skin exposure is considered quite safe because skin is a very good barrier, and if humans are only exposed through skin, it is not comparable to animals that are exposed via inhalation when they get the substance directly to their bloodstream. So it is very, very different, and we have to wonder about that when we see study results, and especially some articles in mass media. And when we get epidemiological data at some point, or when there are studies on animals that have shown that some dose is toxic and some is not, then the dose can be modified. It can be adjusted for humans, and then we finally get a safe level of exposure where no harmful consequences exist for humans in this context. Speaking about context, we go to number 4, which is a context of exposure. And here there can be very different situations where we find ourselves. For example, if we live in a city and have some airborne particles or substances in the air that we inhale. Of course, this is quite low concentration. We do not go and inhale directly from the factory or a plant that is producing these chemicals. It is quite well dispersed, so we don't get high concentration. So usually it is not considered dangerous. A very different story is someone is working at that factory and inhaling a large amounts of substances on a everyday basis. There, we have very specific occupational exposure rules, occupational exposure limits. So this is a very different context. And these contexts can be also mixed up in mass media or everywhere you read about them. And you should wonder, is it something that actually relevant for those who work with these substances, who have very high exposure level? Or is it relevant for people who are just living their normal lives and don't get very high concentrations of this substance? This is something to wonder about and to question when you see something shocking in the news. There are also sensitive periods that people can experience. For example, pregnant women or kids, when they are developing, they are of course more sensitive to certain types of toxins, and for them they may be harmful, but for other people there may be no effect whatsoever. So this is also a context of exposure, and then you have to be very careful with making conclusions and assumptions to everybody. Sometimes it's only specified for specific groups of people where there is a risk of negative consequences, but for everybody else it is okay. And number 5 is legislation and regulations that are in place nationally and globally. There is of course a lot of skepsis about that, because bureaucratic machine is very slow and it takes long time to change the legislation, change the chemical regulations. And there are some examples, unfortunately, of substances that have been restricted or regulated too late. For example, asbestos, that is a natural fiber that can cause pleural cancer in the long run after several decades. And asbestos has been used quite a lot in construction, I think in 70s. And after several decades, there have been more and more incidents of pleural cancer. So this is a very negative experience that we have in this sense, and that is why people are concerned about substances that we use today. Maybe it will happen in the same way as it was with asbestos. Legislation also varies a lot in different parts of the world, and sometimes it's in one country it covers one substance, in another one it doesn't. But good news is that these chemical regulations are usually very overprotective, and even if there is a small hint that this substance can be harmful, it is quite easily restricted, quite easily prohibited. A good example is titanium dioxide. I have a separate video on titanium dioxide on my channel. If you're interested, I will leave the link in the description to this video. And it has been very much restricted in Europe due to toxicity of nanoparticles of titanium dioxide. They are not even toxic in chemical sense. They are toxic because they are just small. It's physical toxicity. They can get into our cell, into the DNA damages. But it's only relevant when we are inhaling this small nanoparticles. If it doesn't come in nanoform, or the route of exposure is not inhalation, then there is actually no danger. And regardless, titanium dioxide was restricted as food additive, which is a very overprotective, very proactive measure, I would say. And maybe even in the future it will be reversed, but for now it is very much restricted. And this is an example of very high level of overprotectiveness of legislation. So this is positive news for people that are concerned, so they can rely on legislation actually to be even more strict than it's needed. Of course, nothing is perfect, and there are quite some flaws in legislation regarding the chemicals, and sometimes we wish that it would be faster, the changes would be easier to make. But it is very important that this legislation is in place, because it is actually restricting corporations and industries, the main sources of toxins that we get in our environment. And it is not much that every person can do about that, but using these regulations we can actually impact these huge corporations, and this is a very good thing. Maybe it was too optimistic what I told you, but I just tried to list the reasons why I am personally not concerned too much about toxic effects of chemicals, because there are actually barriers, our biological barriers or artificial barriers that we created as a humanity. So there is definitely no need to panic, because fear and panic, they prevents us from thinking rationally. And although there are some concerns, especially for professionals, and I think people should also be alert about some things, but there is definitely no need to be over dramatic, no need to fear too much, because there are different processes going on negative side, on positive side, and it is all getting balanced in some way, and this is a good thing. I hope this video was informative and useful for you. If it is so, please like the video, please click the notification button, then you will get notifications about my future videos. Of course, subscribe to my channel. I hope that you stay strong, stay healthy, and see you next time. Bye bye.